right, iPhone says it's 7 o'clock. Are we live, ready to go?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Call the Westfield, Washington Township Advisory Plan Commission order.
make a motion to approve the consent agenda, but I would like to add something before I do that. I think when someone goes above and beyond, they should be thanked for it, and Bell Tire has increased their masonry requirement that we require, and they've increased their landscaping. So they've gone above and beyond what our 32 overlay calls for, and I think they should be thanked for that.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Okay, we'll second that motion.
I have a motion made by Dr. Kelleher, seconded by Mr. Horkade, to approve the consent agenda containing 2004-DDP-08 Harmony Shops, 2006-DDP-13 Bell Tire, who did an exceptional job, and 2007-DDP-17. Call the roll, please.
Ms. Bergman?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Horkay?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Bulgier?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Hey, Pam, I don't know what's up. It's just my computer. You're cutting out, and I'm getting about a half of what you're saying, so I'm not sure if it's on your end or my end, but
Okay. I'm
anyway.
getting the same thing, Randy.
I think people have to mute their side so that one person comes through clearly.
Okay.
So if you're not speaking, just mute it.
Okay. All right, let's move forward. Item of business 2003-PUD-02, Wheeler Landing PUD Amendment 3, Portillo's.
Good evening, Commission. For the record, Caleb Ernest with the Community Development Department. The item presented before you tonight is an amendment to the Wheeler Landing Planned Unit Development District. This area addressed by the amendment is approximately 2.3 acres and is currently zoned the Wheeler Landing PUD District. The area is located at the northwest corner of Wheeler Road and State Road 32. The PUD amendment proposes modifying the State Highway 32 overlay district and development standards as further described in the staff report. This item was introduced at the February 10th City Council meeting. This item received a public hearing at the March 2nd Plan Commission meeting. Since that meeting, staff has received no public comments. Also, since that meeting, the petitioner has submitted revisions in response to both Plan Commission member and staff comments. The petitioner has provided responses to the issue list, which is Exhibit 10, which can be reviewed in Exhibit 11. Further, the city engineer has included comments about the proposed site layout for the project, which can be viewed in Exhibit 12. Lastly, the applicant has provided a letter addressing the parking proposed for the west side of the site. This item is up for a recommendation tonight, and Nick Churchill, representing the project, is here to present details. Other representatives of the project are here as well to answer any questions, and I am available if Commission has questions for staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ernest. Mr. Churchill, you're welcome to proceed.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. For the record, my name is Nick Churchill. I'm here tonight on behalf of Wheeler Landing. With me tonight is Randall Guzzi and Mark Mathias of Portillo's, Rob Antrim of Wheeler Landing, and Alan Fedhajic of Kimley Horn, our civil engineer on the project. The first slide before you is the concept plan from the original PUD ordinance that was approved back in September of 2018. This concept plan created 3 use block districts. Those use block districts developed development standards and use restrictions specific to the environments we attempted to create in each of these use block areas. Area 1 is the area designated in green on the eastern portion of the site. That area's designation as Area 1 was very intentional. We identified and agreed very early on that the Monon Trail was going to be quite possibly the single greatest amenity to this site. And as such, we wanted to make certain that we established development standards that were specific to the uniqueness of the Monon Trail. Area 2 is the area designated in orange. That area is bound to the south by State Road 32, the north by Tournament Trail, the future Tournament Trail extension, the east by Wheeler Road, and the west by the future Grand Park Boulevard extension. This area was meant and designated to reflect the existing development patterns that existed both to our east with McDonald's and Taco Bell, as well as to the west with the Speedway gas station. However, the site that we are discussing this evening, because of its adjacency to the Monon Trail, has a foot in each of these worlds. In fact, and if Kevin, you could advance to the next slide, please. This shows the project with a more specific site planning that was done after the PUD was approved. You can see it in context to Grand Park itself and other areas of adjacent development. Once again, the Monon Trail is shown on our east side. And if Kevin, if you'd advance to the next slide, please, you can see this area in much more detail. When we approached Portillo's about Wheeler Landing and we explained to them what the vision was and what the PUD sought to create, they immediately gravitated toward the lot in question. The director of real estate understood this market and was familiar with the Monon Trail and used that in their decision making to locate on what would be Lot 5. This decision has translated into their site-specific planning to a very great extent. In fact, Kevin, if you'd advance to the next slide, please. You can see the site-specific design in question. Fortunately, a few weeks, almost a month ago now, the Monon Trail Bridge was dedicated, and we were able to see physically how the pedestrians are going to interact with this site, despite the fact that the bridge itself is elevated immediately adjacent to it. The pedestrians will continue north over Tournament Trail. That bridge comes back to grade, and then a surface multi-purpose path brings them back south toward these frontage lots. They then connect with a sidewalk on the south side of Tournament Trail, and Portillo's has designed this site so that a pedestrian coming from the Monon, and we anticipate there will be quite a few of them, will only have to cross a single lane of stop sign controlled traffic at the northern portion of the site plan. I don't know, Kevin, if you could direct their attention to where that connection takes place with the cursor. Is that possible? Thank you very much. In addition to maximizing the pedestrian safety, Portillo's has also agreed to increase the amount of bike parking 5 times what would otherwise be required. In addition, they have increased the size of their patio by 2 times, increasing the total available seating to 100 seats. In addition, they've added a pass-through window on the patio, which is the first of its kind in their portfolio restaurants. All of these things we were really excited about, and we appreciated their site-specific design to accommodate the Monon Trail and all the pedestrians it brings with it. Kevin, if you advance to the next slide, we can see what a pedestrian will be greeted with upon arrival. The view of that patio and the increased landscaping, as well as the intuitive location of the bike parking, is all apparent. The only thing lacking from this perspective is the stop sign itself, which was intentionally omitted to allow for clear views of the building. Kevin, if you'd advance to the next slide, please. We can see that bike parking in more detail, as well as the extent of the patio. The next slide also offers a more detailed view of that patio and just how significant it is. And Kevin, if you'd move one more forward, it'll take us to the front door. You can see the articulation in the building all the different materials and changes. This is not a simple box building. It is meant to have architectural features that stand out and provide an interesting elevation on all 4 elevations. This is a unique site in the fact that it has 3 frontages. Kevin, if you'd actually advance to the next slide, please, we can see some of the views from the bridge itself. This is the view that users of the Monon will see as they head south over Tournament Trail. They can see that patio and all that bike parking, all the activity that it'll bring. One thing I will note while we're up here is the rooftop units from this vantage point are not visible, at least to my eye. Portillo's has agreed to utilize screening on those rooftop units that are color matched. Those louvered screens will be white. They will match the material of the roof. That is intended to not only blend in with the roof itself, but also the roof as it turns up on the opposite side of the parapet. So visually, it will blend in and be almost undetectable, as you can see here. Kevin, if you'd move to the next slide, please. This is further south, and this is a view intentionally included to show what would be the view into the service corridor. There was some concern about what might be visible in this area. Portillo's has agreed to increase the service corridor wall height from 6 feet to 10 feet. And as you can see, there are no views into that area from the Monon Bridge. In addition, the increase in height to that service corridor causes the wall itself to blend perfectly into the architectural style line that runs horizontally across that southern elevation. Kevin, if you advance to the next slide, please. From this perspective, which is the highest point of the bridge over State Road 32, you can just barely see the tops of the HVAC units on the top of the building. They do a wonderful job of blending in because of those white louvers. One other thing before I move too much further past that service corridor, I do want to make mention of the fact that there were some concerns raised over the potential for dumpster lids to be left open in that service corridor area. Portillo's has agreed and plans to integrate a trash compactor into that area and not utilize dumpsters at this site. Kevin, if you would, please advance to the next slide. One of the most consistent bits of feedback that we received in our first appearance was a desire for more masonry materials. In response to that, Portillo's has added a significant amount of brick to these elevations. In this particular slide, you can see the elevation from the initial filing and what was presented that first week of March. And the elevation below is the current composition of materials. There was also some adjustments to signage that you can see illustrated on this elevation as well. The other item of note, and it will be more apparent a few slides from now, is the pad elevation of the site has been revised. And so you can see the way the building integrates or interacts with that Monon Bridge is significantly different than it was previously, much to a positive result as it relates to the visibility of those rooftop units, as well as the impact of the landscaping around the frontage and the screening of the drive-through aisles. And Kevin, if you'd advance to the next slide, please, we can see the revisions to the southern elevation. Here you can see the additional brick that was added, as well as local murals. There are murals specific to the Westfield Shamrocks. There's a mural for the Monon Trail. There's a mural for Grand Park, and there's a mural for the Westfield Airport, which is also part of the Wheeler Landing PUD. In addition, staff asked that Portillo's consider adding additional blade signs to the elevation, and you can see those depicted right where Kevin is indicating. In addition, you can also see the impact of the height increase of that service yard corridor from 6 feet to 10 feet, and how that wall now blends very well into that horizontal style line on that elevation. Kevin, if you'd advance to the next one, please. This is the view of the building from the State Road 32 right-of-way, heading west. And as you can see, the shrubs are depicted as they will be, at the height they will be at installation. And the car that is depicted in the drive-through is almost completely obscured, even at installation height. You can also see the local murals that we mentioned previously, as well as those additional blade signs and the added masonry. If we could advance to the next slide, please. This is a view heading east. You can see once again the significant amount of masonry that was added, as well as the additional signs and murals. This particular view does not show an additional, I believe, 23 shrubs that have been added as recently as last week. In fact, I believe the Plan Commission members, the landscaping that you have most recently seen does not reflect the landscape plan that was filed last Friday. There have been substantial increases in what was already a substantially overly landscaped site. And so we've been appreciative of Portillo's willingness, the extent to which they've gone to landscape the site. If we could advance to the next slide, please. This is the most recent landscape plan that shows all the additional shrubs that were added along those drive-through lanes to obscure the views from both State Road 32 as well as Wheeler Road. The impact of those are enhanced by the elevation difference. The fact that the site has been raised magnifies the effect of that landscaping. And in fact, I believe the total landscaping shown is 53 trees on site, as well as 325 shrubs and ornamental grasses. It's a very significant increase over what was required, and I think Caleb might be able to speak to the specifics of just how much has been provided beyond what is required. If we could, please advance to the next slide. And there you can see the table that indicates just exactly how many trees and shrubs are provided. If you could go to the next slide, please. This site plan, it's the same as the first one we looked at, but at this point we wanted to discuss the parking that is provided on the west side of the site adjacent to the drive aisle. There was some concern about people entering and exiting the site through those spots. In response to that, Portillo's has agreed to install parking stops between those spaces to prevent vehicular traffic from entering or exiting the site anywhere outside of the designated entry points. In addition, Portillo's has agreed to restrict this parking to employees only. It will be signed as such, and the manager of the location will be enforcing that. The positive for that restriction is that the employees will arrive prior to peak hours and leave after peak hours. There were some concerns about people backing into that drive aisle with the off-hour usage. We think that will be mitigated to a great extent. A very similar condition was brought to our attention at the Greenwood location, and Portillo's has reached out to the manager of that location and received a response that there have been no incidents, traffic incidents or otherwise, as a result of that configuration. There's a letter in the file to that effect. In addition, I think Kevin was going to reach out to the planning director down in Greenwood and see if he got any feedback. I don't know if any feedback has been received on that subject.
Yeah, this is Kevin. I can jump in now if you'd like. I did speak with planning director in Greenwood about this issue, and the response there was basically that it's a relatively low volume amount of traffic that within that center. So really, because of that reason, the parking in this similar configuration down there, it works okay, works pretty well. So yeah, it kind of echoed what the Portillo's representatives are saying in Greenwood, that there's really no issues with this configuration down there. Again, kind of really reflecting on the lower traffic volumes using that entrance point.
Kevin, thank you so much for following up on that. If we could advance to the next slide. The next two slides are copies of the emails that are part of the file from Jonathan Nail, the city engineer. We got feedback related to the possibility of examining other possible site configurations. We spent a significant amount of time analyzing those additional site orientations, and unfortunately, they either result in a decrease in traffic mobility safety, pedestrian safety, or an inefficient use of the site to the extent that it makes the site economically infeasible. So all of these letters are part of the file. If you could advance to the next two slides, you could see the second letter. And then the third letter is the one previously mentioned from Portillo's related to the parking down in Greenwood. And then if we could advance one more time, this is the exterior material and color palette board. If there are any questions about the materials that plan to be utilized. And then one more time, we've got a list of all the plan revisions and upgrades that have transpired specific to this site. Significant masonry additions. The total building is now 56% brick. Originally, it was proposed at 35% brick. Let's see. Talked about the patio expansion, screening materials. Sidewalk connectivity was added along State Road 32. That was the subject of quite a bit of thought, trying to weigh the benefits of that versus the situation that was trying to be avoided, which is a pedestrian crossing the drive-through lanes. But ultimately, between us and staff, we decided that it was probably worth making that connection. People will naturally gravitate toward the one on the north side, but the one on the south side will exist in the event that someone does choose to utilize it. As far as that restricted western parking on the drive aisle, the first parking space has been shifted so that it's 96 feet from the future edge of pavement. It's 107 feet from the current edge of pavement, but that would be after the inclusion of a deceleration lane. So there's very significant time for a driver to respond and react accordingly upon entering the site. I think everything else we've touched on. We look forward to any questions that you might have and respectfully request a positive recommendation to the City Council.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Spoljaric, any questions or comments?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Randy. Sorry about that. And the petitioner is aware of the concerns I've had ongoing. Sorry, there seems to be a weird high-pitched noise coming. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
It's not real well. Very loud, but I can hear you.
Okay. The original concerns I had still remain with the way that the site is located and the building is located on the site. And for me, creating that big parking space on 32 at a very important gateway is a critical thing for me. And to screen that parking lot, the landscaping would have to be so much to accomplish that, in my opinion. And I've looked at it in detail, and while there's some shrubs, and quite a few of them actually, I don't know that they're going to provide all that we're looking for in terms of the screen. The trees that are there, especially on the southwest side of the site, are primarily with the ginkgo and then ornamental trees, which we're basically not going to have any kind of year-round effect. And ginkgos are going to take 10 years to do anything, so they're not going to be significant. So I still have the landscaping concerns. I still have some architectural concerns. And I'm in a quandary because I know our community really would like to have Portillo's here. So I'll let everyone else weigh in. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Schmitz, any questions or comments?
Yeah, just as far as comments go, my primary concern, excuse me, after the initial meeting was the south side elevation. And personally, I'm pleased with the improvements that have been made, specifically the landscaping, the materials, changes that have been made in the materials, and certainly the integration of the service areas with the building. Secondly, I'm comfortable with the site layout and orientation. Based on all the explanations we've been given, I think initially I had concerns about it, but given the discussions that, or at least the explanations from Jonathan Nail and Portillo's, I think that it appears to be about the best option, and I'm comfortable with that. And I like as I mentioned before, the materials changes, adding the masonry. I'm not troubled by any perceived inconsistency with overlay requirements. So overall, I'm with the changes made, I'm much more comfortable with this plan now. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. McCarty, any questions or comments?
Yes, thank you. First, I'd like to just echo Mr. Smith's comments and agreements with him on overall it being a better project regarding parking lot, et cetera, things that were mentioned. I'd just like to say that, you know, we all were a little tough when we had the public hearing for Portillo's, myself included, but you know, it's because we want what's best for Westfield. We all want what's best for Westfield. And I think because of being tough and due to the delay a little bit and just, you know, minds be able to come together, I think we have a much better project now than what we had. And this is a winning scenario and proof that when a business is coming to a city and they work with the city, we get an overall better project, not just for the business, but for the consumers and the visitors coming to Westfield. So I would just like to thank Portillo's very much to listening to our concerns, addressing. I'm looking at my notes that I first took at the first meeting and comparing them with the notes from today, and pretty much everything that I at least had jotted down was addressed. I love the percentage change in bricks from 35% to 56%. In looking at these new concepts, at least me personally, and I think about aesthetics just a little bit more, but from 32, and I had mentioned this at the first meeting, I was like, what about the warehouse concept that you guys have all across the country? Well, with having more of that brick along 32, I believe we kind of get a best of both worlds, where we get more of that brick along 32, but then you go around the other side and it's just like, oh, okay, this is a different version of Portillo's. Kind of reminds me of a little bit of a speakeasy concept where you have one thing on one side, the other on the other. And yeah, I won't ramble on. I'll just say I'm very appreciative of the project we have today, and I'm looking forward to this being a staple in the community if it so chooses in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Maui, any questions or comments?
Yes, thank you, Randy. I'll be brief here. First of all, there's no perfect solution when you have a site that's so prominent from all angles, and I appreciate all of the effort that's been put into this. The enhancements have raised this to a level that I find acceptable now, and in particular, I would say it is the pad elevation, the vertical extension of the masonry around the service corridor, and the landscaping along the south is my primary concern, among others as well, but primarily was that view from 32. Just a couple quick things that I would like to get answered before we take action on this. On the south elevation, there are two service doors. I believe the intent is that both would be painted to approximately match the brick. As presented, one is and one is not. And I would just like to get confirmed, yes, on that elevation, I would just like to get confirmation that the intent is for that door on the right to be painted that brick red color as well. I think that probably was the intent. It was probably just a graphical oversight. And then secondly, I do not know the planting species as Ms. Spoljaric and others do, and I intended to look those up but did not. And so the quick question is, along the drive-through in particular, are those shrubs evergreen, and will we have year-round screening from 32 just for headlights in the drive-through? And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maui. Would the petitioner care to go ahead and answer those questions? We have several more people to speak.
Absolutely. As far as the service doors being color matched, yes, they absolutely will. That is an oversight. The planting species year-round, let's see here. We have TD and JF. So we have juniperus, sea green junipers, which I believe are evergreens, and TD is the dense yew, which yews do not drop their leaves either. So I believe we will have year-round screening along that drive-through lane.
Got it. Thank you.
And one more thing, Mr. Maui, you had asked about the type of filtration on the building. Portillo's has provided a really tremendous answer. I don't know if you want that now, but the long and short of it is the filter is ETL listed to UL standard 1046. Grease extraction fractional efficiency performance can remove at least 75% of grease particles, 5 microns in size, and 85% of grease particles, 7 microns in size and larger. In other systems, a standard stainless steel baffle filter is only approximately 32 efficient on grease extraction. So if there's any other details you'd want or need, we'll happily get those to you as well.
No, that wasn't a determining factor for me, but that is interesting and helpful, so thank you for that as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Anything else, Mr. Maui?
Nope, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johns, questions or comments?
I'd say that Mr. Maui has said a lot of what I was going to say, so I'm going to try not to repeat it. My biggest concern was the site layout. It's obviously extremely difficult with the 3 roads, and I guess that I'm going to defer to the city planners who recommended this layout for the site. We're trying to serve multi-users. We are motorists, pedestrians, bicyclists. I think with respect to that, this particular site design does that. I too like the masonry changes. I think raising the pad really makes a huge difference, particularly from the folks using the Monon Trail and also from drivers along 32. I appreciate the improved screening for the trash, and I think I guess I'm about as pleased as I can be with the way that they've addressed the parking issues for the employee parking. I was concerned with folks driving through there, but with the stop blocks there, I think that's a huge improvement. So I'm very pleased with the changes that have been made. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Horke, questions or comments?
Comments, I continued to wrestle with the layout because like others, I had hoped there would be an alternative that could be proposed. I saw options that did not measure up for a variety of reasons. The improvements to the building and landscaping are substantial, and I certainly appreciate those. The elevation and change in elevation of the pad is also something that is pretty substantial and not to be overlooked, how that will better position views to the building from above and below. I continue to kind of wrestle with some of these things. I, during the course of the discussion, did a little aerial view down to Greenwood to see the spaces there that I had not previously been aware of and checked out. There's not as many of them. It's a similar but different kind of circumstance, and I wouldn't see that as something that probably would be as likely to create the issue that I'm still concerned might be here, particularly with a future user on the west side of whatever you want to call the north-south quote-unquote street. But I don't really have any other questions that are just nagging at me that have to be asked. I just continue to try to wrestle with it, and we'll listen to comments from others as we continue through here, and hopefully we can come to a conclusion and a recommendation tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Berkman, questions or comments?
Yes, thank you. First off, I want to thank Portillo's and the petitioner for all their work, because I know that they have tried to put a lot of work into this. Also, thank you, for meeting with us and kind of taking us through everything. I guess the two main issues I had at the earlier public hearing were that we're putting the back of a building facing 32. And Cindy touched on this, but this is the gateway to Grand Park. And I've looked at that elevation. Thank you for pulling it up. I've had that sitting in my kitchen for like 3 weeks, walking by it, walking by it, walking by it. It was the one, can you go back to the one you just had up? So that's going to be cars in a drive-through. We've depicted a sedan. We know mostly it's SUVs and trucks and minivans and things a little bit taller than that sedan going through these drive-throughs. I don't think it's going to get screened. I think we're going to see just cars there with the back of the building with the jut out. And so I'm still just really concerned about the back of a building facing where people are entering Grand Park, where people are going down State Road 32. It starts to set a precedent, perhaps for others, as we move west on 32, that it's okay to put the backs of the buildings along there. So it has me concerned. It has from day one. It was the first comment I think I made in the meeting when we kind of went through the changes. The second thing that I'm really concerned about is with where this drive-through lane exists right now, we are going to have exhaust coming up on that bridge where everybody's trying to exercise and enjoy that Monon Trail. And so I'm very concerned about that as well. Like Cindy said, this is a quandary. And I think Bob's saying the same thing. we want Portillo's in the city. I'd love to see them here. I think they would be a great addition to Grand Park. This is just really tough because I'm really concerned about those two issues, that this still looks like the back of a building facing 32. We haven't done that. And we have this exhaust issue right on the trail. And as I went through where Carmel has bridges, I couldn't think or note anywhere that somebody's put a drive-through on this Monon Trail like this. So those are my comments. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you. Dr. Kelleher, questions or comments?
I'll be brief. Everyone has pretty much echoed what I would have said. We all want Portillo's here. Their effort by increasing the brick and the landscaping and doing a lot of the other things they've done has been wonderful, and I appreciate that. I still have the same concerns that Kristen has, and I still have the concerns about the parking. I wish this site were bigger, because then I think they could have a lot more flexibility. They probably wish it were bigger too. But I am still hung up on the parking, because while the one in Greenwood, it's a lot smaller center, and that's still a big concern for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the commissioners have any additional questions or comments before I speak my piece?
This is Victor. If I may, I just wanted to say one thing, because I just didn't want it to be left unsaid. I share the same concerns that were just said, but echoing my previous sentiments, and as you guys said, this is a conundrum. But with anything, it's not going to be perfect. We want it to be as close to perfection as we can, but sometimes, you got to give a little and work a little. I think that Portillo's has come a long way, and as someone who did criticize them, they came a long way in meeting us in the middle and being able to work with what they were in control of. The layout of the land's complicated and just a little different. I wish it was different as well. But as iron sharpens iron, two entities come together, and I think, especially in this case, we have a better product than what we initially had. I know that might not have added much to the conversation, as we all share pretty much the same sentiments, but I just wanted to, not leave that on the table without being said, that we're not going to get everything, but working together and meeting in the middle is where we're going to get a better project from. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, my turn. Randall Graham speaking. As far as the layout goes, I have to trust Mr. Nail's judgment on this. We trust him and everything else. The city of Westfield says that's the best layout for that. I have to, if he agrees with the petitioner, then I stand with Mr. Nail on that. I also am very pleased for the increase in the masonry. I think it's a fine looking product. I like the addition to the height of the wall around the service area. Also the landscaping. And I think Portillo's has came a long way and brought a product that is far in excess of what's required, even for the State Road 32 overlay. And I think they've done a fine job, and there is no perfection. So I understand the issues that some of the commissioners have, and I'm not saying they're not valid, but again, I say that there is no perfection. So that is the extent of my comments for the record this evening. And since there is no other discussion, I will at this time make a motion to send 2003-PUD-02 Wheeler Landing PUD Amendment 3 Portillo's to the City Council with a positive recommendation.
McCarty will second.
Oh, go ahead.
McCarty will second.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion made by Randall Graham, seconded by Mr. McCarty, to send 2003-PUD-02 Wheeler Landing PUD Amendment 3 Portillo's to the City Council with a positive recommendation. Will the staff please call the roll?
Mr. Graham,
Yes.
Mr. Horke,
Yes.
Mr. Johns,
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher,
No.
Mr. Maui,
Yes.
Mr. McCarty,
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz,
Yes.
Ms. Boljeric,
With reservation, yes.
Ms. Bergman.
No.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Yep, thank you. Move on to our next item of business this evening, which is 2005-ODP-09, 2005-SPP-09, Monon Corner Subdivision.
Good evening, Commission. For the record, I am Corey Harris of the Community Development Department. This item before you is the Monon Corner Overall Development Plan and Primary Plat for 325 lots on approximately 135 acres south of 206th Street, west of Horton Road in the Chatham Hills PUD District. This item received its public hearing at the June 15th Plan Commission meeting. This item has received one additional public comment since its public hearing. The petitioner has made several changes to the landscape plan in response to the comments from the Plan Commission and public comments since its public hearing. As the plans as shown are compliant with all applicable standards, if there are no concerns from the public or Plan Commission, staff recommends approval of the primary plat and overall development plan this evening with the condition listed. Christian Rector from Arbor Homes is present this evening and plans on presenting, and I am available for questions for staff.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Mr. Rector, you may proceed.
Thank you, Corey, and thank you, Commission, for allowing us to come back here before you guys. As we discussed on June 15th, this is our preliminary plat for the Monon Corner subdivision, which is currently zoned, and we are in compliance with that zoning as a part of the Chatham Hills PUD. The three main concerns we heard on June 15th were the installation of the amenities, which includes a pool, 3 pickleball courts, a playground, and trails, among some other things, and then lastly the street lights, which was a little into the specifics of whether that would be the frosted glass or clear. Is specifically focusing on those three concerns. We are prepared to commit to the frosted glass so long as that is commercially available as we go to install. We are not to that point yet, but we don't anticipate having issues with that. The installation of the amenities, we would propose that the pool would be included within the section that includes the 100th lot in the community. Given we anticipate our first section being over 60 lots, we assume that will be section 2, but we have not gotten far enough into the sectioning and overall design of the engineering work to confirm that for certain. On a similar note, since we don't know exactly how the sectioning will be, we would propose that all other amenities be included within the section that they are platted within. So when we build the common area and plat that includes the pickleball courts or the playground, those amenities be built with those sections. And then the last and the most major concern we heard was from the one remonstrator, our neighbors to the north, the Shirleys. When we came last time, our plan conformed with all requirements of Westfield's ordinance with regards to landscape buffering. After meeting with the Shirleys, amongst other things, we have agreed to extend that landscape mound at 5 foot in height, the entire width or entire length of their property line. We have added 59 additional spruce pine trees along that mound on top of the trees that were already there and required by Westfield. We've additionally added 15 trees within that common area where we've moved the path to bring it away from their property line. And in our communications over the last day or two, and not reflected in this plat, we've agreed to add 5 additional trees within that common area. I will say the Shirleys are asking for a 3rd row of pine trees along the mound. I know they reached out to Corey, letting him know of that request this morning. We believe we've already gone above and beyond the requirements, obviously, as we've added additional 59 along that mound. We also don't believe that long term that is for what is best along that area. While I understand their desire to have immediate screening, the trees we're proposing are going to be 30 to 60 feet tall and grow to approximately 25 foot in width. So having a 3rd row of there on top of the shade trees, as well as all the shrubs that are required by the ordinance that we have along that mound as well. We think we're just going to choke out that landscaping, and think that what we proposed is meets the point of their concerns as well as what's best long term. So unless you guys have any additional comments, I think we heard everything else last time. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess my only question was, this is Randall Graham, was I had read the request for the additional trees and had wondered if you were going to add those. But hearing your explanation as to the size of the other trees, I'm not a landscape expert. There'll be some people talk here in a little while that know a lot more than I do, but it sounds reasonable. So that was the only thing that I had. Dr. Kelleher, you have any questions or comments?
A couple. Thank you for considering all of these things. I know that you're going above and beyond what the PUD says, but I think in this case, it's certainly a gesture of goodwill on your part. I have a question. I could not zoom in on this landscaping along the Shirley property really well. The circles with the dots in the center, those are all shade trees?
Yes, the circles that are with dots that are pretty light, those are the shade trees. So those are on both sides of the mound, as you can see through there. And then on the mound, you see the denser circles, and there are really 2 rows of them now. All of those are pine trees. And then, as you mentioned, not being able to zoom in too close, intermixed within those 2 rows are shrubs as well. But across that property line, there are 59 pine trees.
Okay. And the shade trees are not, what do I want to say? They're not ornamentals. They're actual shade trees.
We discussed with the Shirleys, and you guys had 4 different trees there that we could pick from. We actually worked with the Shirleys of what those could be. I don't have off the top of my head, but we worked with them from your list as to which trees they wanted on that property line. And also, I apologize, I misspoke a second ago when I said 59 trees. That's in addition to what was already required. So it's actually 82 trees along that property line.
Right. Okay, thank you. And these are, as I recall, when I read it, they're 12 feet on center?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And I think that's good. I appreciate you're looking at the lighting. Again, it's not a requirement, but if the frosted is available, I think you might find it will be much softer, especially to outside neighbors. So I appreciate you're looking into that. Only one other suggestion, which is again just a suggestion. You talk about pine trees, and I'm assuming you mean an evergreen, not necessarily pine, because that white pine comes to mind or something like that.
Yes, in talking with the Shirleys along their line, they have requested Black Hill spruce or Norwegian Norway spruces.
Okay.
So that's what we're focusing in along there. Everything else comes from your list, and that last page calls out the exact number of each species. Sorry, I'm not a landscaper either, so yeah.
That's okay, and that's okay. And again, I think this is a huge addition to that buffer, along with the raising that berm from 3 to 5 feet. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Berkman, questions or comments?
Thank you. I just had a couple. So the Shirleys, I was trying to, you might have been on copy of my email this afternoon, and I appreciate everybody getting back to me. The Shirleys sent me their list, and I know Arbor Homes has responded, and I certainly appreciate you working with this neighbor. They had something on here about fence material, and I think in one of your emails you did say you were willing to work with them. Is that on the actual residences in this neighborhood, or is that a fence along their property? Confused by that.
One of their concerns was the type of fencing installed by the homeowners, not along the property. So we agreed in our DCCRs to limit the fence materials allowed. I believe that is for privacy fencing, white vinyl. It's 6 foot, and everything else 4 foot black wrought iron.
Okay, great. And they did not want a fence along their particular property line?
That is correct.
Okay, super. And then I know that the drainage things are something that you'll have to look at down the line as this kind of gets going. They had also asked if that was going to be single-story homes along their property line. Did you have an answer for them on that?
Yes, since this is just a plat, not zoning, I apologize if we skipped over this last time. But of the development here, 91 lots, including that section we're looking at right now, is going to be our new destination series line of homes that is an age-targeted product. It is all single stories. It does offer the option for bonus rooms, but it's a single-story ranch product. Targeted that empty nest buyer, and the DCCRs will limit things like play sets, basketball goals, trampolines in that section.
Okay, great. And then I did notice that you also moved the trail as much as you could away from their property, I believe, in this redo.
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. The only thing that I asked Corey about, and maybe he's already talked to you about this, but in the right-hand column of the landscape plan, it kind of calls out AGSF1, here's our buffer, on Horton Road buffer. Would it just be possible, before that goes to council, to actually call out their buffer and what they're getting? Just on the side area. You've got it in the picture, but just so it's clear and somewhat in writing that you're doing all these things.
Kristen, this is Kevin. This is a plat. This isn't zoning, so this isn't going to council.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Thank you. So Kevin, is this enough documentation then, just in the drawing, and we don't need it in writing on the side?
Yeah, the plans are compliant, so you should be able to approve them as is. So yes, this is enough documentation.
To show that they've made these, because they were compliant probably when we saw it, but now they've gone kind of above and beyond for this neighbor because we asked them to. So this is now the documentation that everybody, I guess, will be held to with this addition of the 59 spruce trees. Does that make sense?
This is Brian Zager. I would suggest not changing any exhibits because that's part of the ordinance that was already adopted. And if they are compliant, what you're suggesting is a change in that ordinance.
Okay, so how do we, is it a commitment or how do we just know between these email exchanges that this all happens is my question.
So all the additional trees and what we've committed to here in the minutes will be on record and tied to this vote. So at least that's my understanding. This plat and what you see, we're actually missing 5 trees that we agreed today to add, but the 59 additional spruces along the mounding are in here, and then those 5 trees. All of this is on the record tied to the vote. So if somebody from Westfield I'm wrong, that's my understanding of it.
Yeah. Brian, this is Kelleher. Is that adequate?
That's adequate. I'm happy with that. I think that it's part of the record and it's what staff's going to look at when they come through for permits.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and it's just, you know, Brian, it's again, if something happened where this arbor decides not to do it and the next person comes in, I just want to make sure the Shirleys get what, you know, what was agreed to at this point. So
I would suggest keeping in mind that this addition by the developer at this stage, when he was already compliant, is looked at as a gratuitous change.
I agree.
And not an obligation.
Yeah.
But he's done it, and the record's going to reflect those numbers.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks so much. I really appreciate you working with them.
Thank you. Mr. Horke, questions or comments?
I'm okay with things. There was one comment that was made about the age of the residents that was referred to as an age targeted, but in correspondence, the adjacent property owner had asked for age restricted, which are 2 entirely different things. This is age targeted. It's not going to be similar to a Del Webb type community or something like that. This is a product that will discourage fun for people of younger ages, so they'll unlikely have anybody, but it's not really going to be legally an age restricted community, correct?
That is correct. Del Webb does have 1 or 2 age-restricted communities, but given the hoops you have to jump through to do that legally, given the fair housing laws and everything, we're going with age targeting. As I said, the restrictions will have things meant to discourage that, but it's not legally binding to prevent anyone under 55 from moving in.
Yeah, okay, just want to make sure that was clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johns, any questions or comments?
No questions, no comments. Looks good.
Thank you.
Mr. Maui, questions or comments?
I have no questions or comments. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you. Mr. McCarty, questions or comments?
Yeah, I'll just say that I appreciate the amenity commitment, as we've had trouble with that here in Westfield. Then also working with the Shirleys with the tree increase. And I just have a question for staff because I haven't done this yet before. So I may or may not be allowed to do this, but just due to my connection with the area and with growing up around there, and with the project being in compliance, I would of course have to say or vote yes, but in good conscience I just cannot do that. So would I be able to abstain or recuse myself from the vote?
You can abstain.
Your only function here tonight, Victor, though, is to see if it's compliant. That's the only function you have. And if it is compliant, I'd say you have to vote yes.
Okay. Well, and that's what my thinking was, of that if it is compliant, of course, you have to vote yes. It's just in talking to neighbors around the area and so forth, and I know it's plotted the way it is, it's just morally, I just don't think I can do this.
This is Zager again. Talking to neighbors outside the meetings is an issue you probably ought to bring up with Kevin and the expectations of those on this board. But yeah, for tonight, this is just to decide if it is compliant with the plans that were approved by the council, by the zoning. I'm sorry.
Of course, yes. It was just a question. I just didn't know if I could do it or not. So.
Thank you. Mr. Schmitz, questions or comments?
Nothing additional from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Paul-Jarrett, questions or comments?
Just one administrative question. With the amenities and saying that it's going to be, the trigger is the 100th home, how is that memorialized? Are we doing that by improvement location permit? And do we need an actual written commitment on that? Because I don't know if it appears anywhere else. So if we have nothing legally tied to that, I don't know how we enforce that. Thanks.
Thank you.
The staff report that comes out of this meeting will note the changes, and the developer will be held to the changes that he's offered.
And I just want to clarify, the commitment was that it would be included in the section that included the 100th lot. So that was the exact commitment.
Oh, okay. Well, that actually could mean something quite different than what I thought it would too then. Because it doesn't necessarily mean the pool has to be completed with the 100th. And if that next section is a huge section, it very well might not get built. And you could basically have up to 2 sections built, correct? And not have the amenities?
The anticipation is that it will be built with the development work of section 2. We anticipate that to include the 100th lot. We just don't know that. If we need to amend that to say it'll be included in the construction plans for section 2, that's what I anticipate will be happening.
I wish we had a little bit something better tied down to ensure that we actually have that. And I believe you probably know the situation that we face in a different community, and I just don't want to see that reproduced.
Yes. And my understanding was for us to record our plat for that section, with it being included that if it's not built at the completion of the development of that section, we would have to post a performance bond to ensure that it's built. If we need to further commit that we can't get our construction plans approved for the following section after that until it's actually built, is an additional commitment. I've got no problem with that. It's our intent is we're not going anywhere, and that's when we plan on building it. We just don't have the full sectioning of exactly how it's working out.
I totally understand, and I just want to know exactly how we could work to enforce it is all. I mean, weird things happen. We all know that. So
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, the commissioners have anything further? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
This is Maui. I make a motion that we approve the primary plat and overall development plan 2005-SPP-09 and 2005-ODP-09 Monon Corner subdivision, with the condition that all necessary approvals be obtained from the Westfield Public Works Department and Hamilton County Surveyors prior to the issuance of an improvement location permit.
Okay, seconds.
Have a motion made by Mr. Maui, seconded by Mr. Horke, to approve 2005-ODP-09, 2005-SPP-09 with the staff's noted condition. Will the staff please call the roll?
Mr. Horkay,
Yes.
Mr. Johns,
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Mr. Maui,
Yes.
Mr. McCarty,
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz,
Yes.
Ms. Boljerick,
Yes.
Ms. Bergman,
Yes.
Mr. Graham.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
You as well. We'll move on to our final item of consideration this evening, and then we have 3 public hearings. The next item on the agenda is 2006-PUD-06, Hoosier Hills PUD.
Good evening, APC. For the record, this is John Dorsey with the Community Development Department. Before you tonight for recommendation is the Hoosier Hills Plan Unit Development. This project is generally located at 18325 Spring Mill Road, totals an approximate 35 acres in size. This ordinance proposes to modify the current AGSF1 agricultural single-family rural district to allow for agritourism, agritainment, and agricultural uses. This petition has held a public hearing at your June 3rd meeting and has since made updates to the ordinance. These changes include the removal of certain uses, modification to landscape requirements, removal of exhibits, and general language changes. Here this evening is the petitioner Noah Herron with his representative Matt Pleasant to give a brief presentation. Staff will remain available to answer any questions should there be any. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. Mr. Pleasant, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President, Jonathan, members of the Plan Commission. Matt Pleasant of Pleasant Cities LLC at 5821 Julian Avenue, Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm representing Noah Herron of Herron Holdings LLC, owner and operator of Urban Vines Winery and Urban Farmer in Westfield. Next slide, please, Kevin. Just real quick before we begin, I just wanted to take a few minutes to just remind everybody where Hoosier Hills PUD is located. As Jonathan described, it's located at 18326 Spring Mill Road, just south of 186th Street, south of Sundown Gardens, and the Westfield Grand Park Sports Campus. The current location has a horse farm as it's functioning today. The property is roughly 35 acres, surrounded by agricultural. Next slide, please. The site is currently zoned AGSF1 agriculture, and the property surrounding the site is agriculture, except for the Garden Market PUD, also known as Sundown Gardens to the north. Next slide, please. And again, just contextually, it's relatively just south of the Lancaster and the Cedar Brook PUD, Cedar Brook Commons, excuse me, PUD, south of the Grand Park. Wheeler PUD is to the east, and as we transition, it moves to farmland and some residential housing, transitioning to the west. If you go to the next slide, please, Kevin. So we kept this same exhibit. The Hoosier Hills PUD development is contemplated having 2 agritourism districts. The PUD is an underlying zoning district of AGSF1. And as just a reminder from before, that this site would include both Urban Vines Winery, the processing of the grapes, and anything that's grown in the orchard to process into the said wines, instead of where they are located today, as well as Urban Farmer, the seed packaging and shipping would also be located at this site. It would be away from 161st Street, where it is currently located, thus moving all the operations to this site. I'm actually going to switch this over to the actual PUD, Kevin, if you don't mind. Based off of our conversation at our public hearing at the beginning of June, we deeply appreciated the feedback, and as you know, we submitted revisions to you in the interim, and then we received some additional feedback, both from Plan Commission and from staff. I would say that there isn't any substantive changes. However, we did remove some uses. For example, the biggest thing that we had been described to was that we had some mixed, I'll call them mixed reviews about the cabins. And talking to Noah and talking to staff, we felt that it might be best to remove those. I was calling them like mini hotels / cabins along thing. I still believe it's probably a good idea in Westfield. However, I think we're looking at more research needs to be done if it were to be at this site, let alone if it were to be somewhere else in Westfield. So with that, we decided that it'd be best to just remove it for now, or remove it entirely from this PUD, to not allow those cabin, I call them the cabin barn homes, the mini hotels as we had proposed earlier. There was a couple comments about formatting. So working with staff, we locked down some really, the specific language that was that the Plan Commission was looking for, as well as staff was able to effectively be able to administer this ordinance. Lastly, the things that were addressed in this was landscaping. There were a few provisions in there that were included earlier, based on, if you recall even at all, we had the storage units were a possibility to be in this. Those were removed. The cabin hotels have now been removed. So a lot of these provisions, such as the street trees, would not apply to the site anyway. However, if it were to apply, it would comply with the UDO. The minimum lot landscaping requirements, the same as said. Foundation plantings, we were anticipating to meet the requirement anyway, and the planters were just more of an aesthetic. However, of a couple comments that we received from staff, we felt that, it's probably just best to just comply with the UDO. It's what everybody knows, and there's no questions when it actually comes time for the detailed development plan and any sort of improvements that need to be made to the site. So we are complying. Noah Heron will comply with street tree requirement, minimum lot landscaping requirements, foundation planting requirements. The only things we left in there were the buffer yard, the parking area landscaping modification we would like to keep in there. The external street frontage, originally we had to where what is there today would apply, and that would meet the requirement. And if you guys could see me, I would show you. But speaking with Noah, we felt it was best that this requirement that we've included here, which was to keep the required amount of trees, but reduce a little bit on the amount of shrubs. And in reality, we felt this was important because this site is going to be dominated by agriculture, and it will still have this agricultural feel to it. And I'll express it here in a few minutes. That you should still be able to see the site. We want you to be able to see the vineyard. We want you to see the orchards that'll be growing throughout. And we want you to be able to see it from Spring Mill. Felt that was very, very important for this specific place. And lastly, we just kind of locked down some specific language that staff had suggested to us. regarding the events, the surface area parking requirements, and what have you. So, Kevin, if you don't mind switching back to the presentation. If you go to the very last slide. Oop. So it was asked that we kind of make a concept, because I think this also does help. It's nice to have that district separation to show between 1 and 2. However, having a concept just like really show, okay, what exactly are we planning here? So so we have something drafted up for you as a concept. This shows right here of the vast amount of agriculture, the vineyards, orchard, and farming that is intended to take place. Any sort of agritourism were to happen in these light blue colors. However, I will also argue that and say that any place that does say agriculture today, at least on this exhibit, could also be the vineyards, orchards, and additional farming that Mr. Heron would like to allow. And again, showing the parking to have the people on there. The question was added to this PUD. That was a question by staff. Staff had brought it up in the interim in between the public hearing. Originally, it was not necessarily going to be involved, but staff felt like, hey, it was there. It's probably a good idea to have it in place, and we don't disagree. We thought that was a very good suggestion by staff, by keeping somewhat of a historical perspective from to still be here and thriving. In summary, the Hoosier Hill provides a perfect location for urban farmer, urban vines processing facilities, complementing both a local and regional tourism aspect, but as well as keeping the agricultural history of Westfield in such a very important location close to Grant Park. With that, I want to say thank you for your time. We both know and I appreciate the feedback and going through this process. We firmly believe that because that we were open and willing to work with both you and both staff, we ultimately come out as a much better proposal than we initially had begin with. So again, thank you, and we would respectfully request a positive recommendation to the council this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Pleasant. Ms. Spoljaric, any questions or comments?
Yes, I do. I'm going to start with the definitions, because even starting out there, I've got some concerns. So the agritourism, I have a problem with putting a permitted use, adding a permitted use to a definition, when actually that should be in a separate area. And we have the same problem with the temporary use in events. It goes on to talk about that it shall not require a temporary use and event permit and those kind of things. And I don't believe those should be in any definition, just personally speaking. I've got quite a few issues still, and I wish I didn't. I feel like we still don't have enough guardrails around this. And even though we took the cabins out, I don't know what to expect from this site right now. And that concerns me. And when you ask for things to be waived, like parking and loading standards, and not requiring a temporary permit for certain events, I don't know if I'm approving something that is 20 people or 2,000 people, and if it's one day a month or if it's, most days. And so I go back to a lot of concerns with the proposal right now with those kind of things. So right now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to be a no. But thanks.
Thank you. This is Matt again, if I may. This beginning section where Kevin is showing the screen under definitions, this was actually provided to us from staff based off of another PUD that they recommended to us to just use in its entirety to put in this PUD, and it worked really well for us. And like I said, it was a way for them to clearly administer. It was also a way that we heard you as a plan commission amended to where we thought was amending to your needs and desires.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but it's still, I don't like the way we do that, because if you look, section 6 is permitted uses. And when you're gonna say garden center is a permitted use in this area, it belongs there, not in a definition. And it's just stuff like that that kind of, that I don't like, and that's a smaller issue for me overall, but I just wanna let you know.
Thank you. Mr. Schmitz, questions or comments?
Yes, I share Cindy's concern to an extent about not knowing what to expect with this project, and that's kind of where I've been from the start with it, because it's the type of thing that calls for, I guess it has a lot of creativity and discretion on part of the developer as far as which direction this goes. However, I'm a lot more comfortable with it now, based on that final exhibit that was addressed, that shows the 3 colors for the development of the site. It's just that this process is so much different than most of the reasons we're dealing with in recent years, where we're dealing with improvements and things that we can see, and not just splash drawings of uses and what uses are there. To me, these uses make sense and I'm comfortable with, particularly with pulling those cabins out. I guess the only concern I have is I don't quite know what to expect as far as future improvements, both from a parking lot standpoint and physical buildings that would be constructed. And I guess with an underlying zoning of AGSF1, then it would be anything that could go on AGSF1. So I think I'm comfortable with this. It's just outside. It's just so different than what we've been dealing with lately. I'm struggling with this. So I want to hear other comments from other commission members, but I'm definitely more comfortable with it, and I understand it better, and it's much more palatable today than it was at the initial presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schmitz. Mr. McCarty, questions or comments?
I'll just briefly say that I agree, concur with all the statements that were just made. So that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Maui, questions or comments?
Yeah, just one additional comment that I haven't heard so far. Mr. Pleasant indicated that there was no substantive change, I think was the word he used. And while I appreciate the friendly tone of his delivery, I'd say that the deletion of the cabins in particular is a very substantive change. For me, in fact, and that maybe for others too, based on what I'm hearing, those cabins were my greatest concern with the PUD as it was originally proposed. So that's a big difference right there. And the reason I want to point this out is there's a lot of commentary within the exhibits, and I think even Mr. Pleasant noted this when he was presenting about a possible desire to reconsider some sort of lodging or cabins or something in the future. And just to be very, very clear, as this really affects my position, that that's not in the PUD right now. So what we're being asked to act on right now does not have a short-term occupancy or lodging type component. So anything about maybe we'll come back, whether it's this site or someplace else. Obviously anybody can choose to do that, but at this time, it's not. I guess I want to be clear that any action today by me wouldn't imply that I would necessarily ever favor or approve the addition of cabins at any time in the future. It's not written in there. It was taken out. That's a big deal for me right now. And while I'm open to that possibility, if it's presented in a way that is palatable, I just don't want any implication, because the way the wording is sprinkled through all the exhibits, this doesn't mean that I'm considering that to be okay at all. So a little bit of double speak there, I guess, for me, but just want to be clear on that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johns, questions or comments?
I'm going to try to be cautious with my comments. I would agree with everything that Cindy Spoljaric said. In my opinion, the project as proposed, the ordinance in front of us is just too vague. I don't have any real clear idea of what they're doing or what they're proposing. I totally do not like the idea of not requiring any temporary use or event permits. I think we're opening the door to just a lot of things happening on this property, and a lot of them not good. So at this point, I totally against and not support of this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Horke, questions, comments?
Comments more so than questions. The simplification was an improvement, trying to just hone this down, whittle it down to something with less confusion is helpful, but like others have said, I'm not sure I yet fully understand what's likely to happen other than growing grapes and something to make seeds from and creating the beverages to sell on 161st Street. But there's a lot of intent, it seems, to be able to do other things. I don't know if it was the car condo that was the representative example of how to do the uses, but it was pretty uncomfortable when we kind of allowed the pass on permits there, and I would certainly not want to be making a habit of that. So, like others have said as well, I'm less inclined to look favorably on something that's trying to separate themselves from having to get permits for things that I believe probably really should have them. So I wouldn't be in a position to send a forward favorable recommendation without some better clarity to really what's expected to happen here. I'm just not there yet.
Thank you, Mr. Horke. Ms. Berkman, any questions, comments?
Yes, thanks, Randy. I personally think this has just a lot of potential, and also to be a really good marketing tool for Grand Park. So after hearing all these comments, which I think are very good, maybe we all need to take a step back on this one and get a little more definition on the things that are causing people some caution. But that's up to the commission, but I guess that's what I would say, because I do think that, we have a business person that lives in the community that's, wanting to do something that's just got a lot of potential here. And I'd hate to see it just totally go away, because we need to kind of get some things clarified and more clarity to it. So thank you.
Thank you. And that would be up to the petitioner, Ms. Berkman, if they chose to do that. Dr. Kelleher, do you have any questions or comments?
Where do I start? I want to like this. Like Kristen, I think if done well, it could be an asset to Westfield and to Grand Park. It also has, the way it's written right now, the potential to be what I think would be not a good thing. If I go through it, it started off with having storage units. It started off having cabins. I think that probably Noah knows that the definition of agritourism is an operating farm, which is what he is planning on doing. And I am glad for this bubble diagram that shows part of that. But in addition to an operating farm that has a farm store and maybe a little restaurant to go along with it and the kind of things that we imagined agritourism to be, he has also added special events. And I think of places like the Horse Patrol, the Palomino Ballroom, places like that. So I have no idea what size he's talking about, how many people. And there should be a requirement for asphalt paving a large parking lot for that. Again, this doesn't have any parameters that I'm comfortable with. Special events could be anything. If he doesn't want to do landscaping, I would be happy with an alternative to leave a vineyard out front or an orchard out front or even the hayfield that exists there today. I mean, I'm not stuck with saying you've got to plant street trees and all that, as long as you give me something that is attractive, that brings you into the site, and that if this is going to be agritourism, indeed shows me that from the road. Whereas with urban vines, there were supposed to be vines out front and a parking lot behind, and somehow all those vines went away and now we have a parking lot out front. So there are just too many things that aren't nailed down enough yet. And I want to support this, but I can't the way it's written. And I would suggest that, you go back and think about where you want some of these things. The other permitted use, a garden center. Garden center in our definitions calls for plants, bushes, trees, equipment, tractors, shovels. It's a store. And I'm not sure that that has anything to do with agritourism. So I think we're combining a lot of different uses under an umbrella of agritourism, which really has very few requirements architecturally or anything else. And while I'm willing to consider some of those other uses, they have to have some kind of definition on size and materials and other things, because basically AGSF1 has no requirements for building. Now, I know he's added that it will be consistent with single family residential type of materials, but I'm not sure what that even means. So again, I would like to support this. I can't right now. I think with a much more concrete plan, I'm like Kristen, I would be willing to look at that. But right now, it's just too wide open.
I'm sorry to interject. This is Matt again. I think I hear you all. And I think if you don't mind.
Hey, Matt, why don't you let him go through the whole commission? And
you're right. I'm sorry.
Fine.
Dr. Kelleher, would you like to continue? Or are you done?
No, I think I've said enough. Thank you.
Okay, well, I get to speak also. I think I started with agreeing with Cindy's concerns, which are echoed by, I believe, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Horkay, and certainly Dr. Kelleher, maybe some others. Things that really bothered me. I will say it's positive cabins being gone. That was a deal breaker for me. You want to come back later and ask for something, that's right. Growing the grapes in the vineyard, I think that's wonderful. Like Dr. Kelleher said, there was going to be a vineyard at the other place, and it ended up looking nothing like we thought it was going to look like the diagram. So, I mean, I don't have any reassurance that the red zone's ever going to look like vineyards, orchards, or farming from past history. Special events, I don't know what that is either. I'm concerned about size, how many people as well. And I guess my real hangnail is the no temporary use or event permits. I would not be in favor of that at any time. So if you're wondering what to go back and work on, if you choose to do that, that's your prerogative, but that's what I have to say. So Mr. Pleasant, if you would like to say what you need to say, go right ahead.
I apologize for I miscounted. I thought everybody had spoken. That's my fault. This is Matt again. I think when we're talking about this, I think so. I'm gonna circle back around. I'll start with the garden center first. The garden center is a use that's allowed for agritourism, and we added that in there, and that's. A big thing was Mr. Heron has an opportunity that he might be able to sell the northern section, the northern blue section to Sundown Gardens, and we didn't want to have Sundown Gardens to be able to have to come back to you and ask for another amendment for something that you just saw. So by extending some of the Sundown Gardens, if again that is something that Mr. Heron and Sundown Gardens comes to an agreement with, that would be permitted. However, if that is not, it is likely that the vineyards, orchard, and farming would be extended up into that region. Everything here was based off. I mean, I think we're concerned. Like, I hear your concerns. Like, you're afraid to have, let's say, like a 1,000 person, 2,000 person festival showing up in one small location like this, and that's not necessarily the intent of what's going on, or what's supposed to be intended. What's supposed to be allowed is more or less having some. Basically, this entire PD was based off Stuckey Farms, and the Cedar Brook Commons. Cedar Brook Commons is a little bit different, but Stuckey was along the same lines as same vision as what this one is supposed to be today. It's an existing farm, just like this one. They have yearly events, and that's something that's been contemplated with Mr. Heron as well, in connection with the urban vines, the vineyards and processing facilities. So I'm hoping that puts a little bit of perspective on exactly what's here. I'm actually going to toss this to Noah and see if he has any additional comments before we make a decision to move forward, or if we want to step back.
Can you guys hear me? This is Noah.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, it sounds like we need to take a step back and define a couple things. Like we said, we got some advice from staff and whatnot to kind of do it this way. We didn't think going in tonight that there were still some concerns on certain things. The temporary events things, I mean, I don't know if we can add a couple stipulations right now that makes, I mean, it sounded like a lot of it was the asking for the temporary events to go away. Like, I'm totally okay with doing that. I mean, it wasn't my intention to try to get around much. I just dealt with it at Urban Vines when you want to do something kind of small with like 30 people and you have a tent that's bigger than 200 square feet or 300 square feet, you got to go spend $200 and get permission to do it. So we're not trying to have big events. So I don't know if it's okay if we remove the temporary events thing, and then, I mean, the size of things, I mean, I don't know if you can limit it to the size of the parking, but our parking lot, I mean, could maybe hold 60, 70 cars max how it is right now. So we would never be able to grow outside of that without having to come back and ask for more parking. So that was my intention was, well, this is our parking that we're showing. This is the size of it. Obviously, if we get bigger than that, we're going to need more parking and have to come back, and that kind of limits the size of the events. So I don't know if we can put a couple of stimulations or add a couple of things and ask for a vote tonight, or if we just or what to do. I guess that's kind of a staff question.
This is Kelleher. May I speak? Randy?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I know for me that won't do it, Noah. And again, I want to support this, but when you talk about Stuckey Farms, I don't think of special events and weddings and things like that. Not that that might not be appropriate here, but they have all of the uses that we have in our definition of agritourism or agritainment. They have the mazes, the corn rides. They don't really have an inside building that has special events. So while that may be all you intend, the potential here is for something much larger. And I think that's what concerns all of us. What you're seeing in your head it sounds good, but it's not on paper. And we all know that zoning is written for whoever owns the land, not just you. So, we have to be careful that this is written in such a way that it gets what we think you're saying. Anyway, that's me. I'm done.
This is Noah. Like I said, I don't know, maybe I didn't say it right. I'm okay removing the special events because what I really need right now is just be able to get into that building and move my companies into there. All this other stuff is we can come back to later on. So if removing that special events and having to come back and define it a little bit better and come back later on, that's okay with me. It's more of a getting production started and my seed company moved into the building. So if that's something we can remove tonight, I'm okay with that.
This Kelleher here again. I'm not sure it's that simple, but I would have to ask staff because there are other requirements like landscaping and things. I'm fine if you just do agritourism the way the definition is. But there are a lot of other things in here that make me uncomfortable. So I don't want to stop you from getting in and making this an agricultural site, which you don't need our permission for anyway.
Yeah, this is Kevin. I mean, I can't answer off the cuff either what just simply removing the temporary use, what other effects that may or may not have. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to necessarily put Noah in a time crunch here, but yeah, that's.
Well, now, Kevin, it's Kelleher again. And I agree, because I would have to look through the rest of the ordinance to see what that changed. He's also talking about removing special events. But certainly agricultural uses, growing and seeds and, moving his vineyard, all of those are permitted without any change in the zoning on this at all.
Yeah, you could do that today.
Right.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Matt Pleasant again. Actually, agritourism right now is an agritainment, which is kind of what we're gearing toward because of the vineyard and the processing and what have you. It is, at least based off staff, it is a special exception. So we would still have to make some sort of permission from.
I think we're talking about two different things, Matt. I think Jenny's maybe suggesting if you just need to get in there and start growing things and using a building in an agricultural format, then Noah can just move in and do that today and not need this PUD. If he wants to invite the public for tours and events and whatever else agritourism and agritainment would afford you or him, then that's where I think we're coming into a zoning issue. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it all comes down to how it's going to be used and what the vision really is. Because as I think between meetings, I think our understanding of the vision did fall more in line of maybe of a Stuckey. I mean, I'm not talking orchards and all of the exact same elements that Stuckey has, but it's more similar activities, which is I think why we directed you in that manner. But if that's not the case, then I don't even know what we're doing. I mean, we may not even need this. So,
No, that is the case. I mean, we do want agritourism on the property. I mean, long term.
So then I think we need to spend some more time knuckling down and figuring out what this really is and what it isn't, and detail that out, because I think there's still a whole lot of confusion out there. Sounds like amongst the commission members.
Yeah. So here's my suggestion from the president. It can go either way. Matters not to me. If you're so inclined to continue this, discuss it with staff, work it out, and bring back something that you think is more acceptable for us to vote on, that's fine. Or if you want a vote right now, that's fine. But I am not comfortable with chiseling away at it right now. This is not how we do things. And I'm not going to start with it now. So essentially, Mr. Hare and Mr. Pleasant, it's your decision. We can vote, or you can continue. It matters not to me. I've heard both ways. You were possibly wanting to continue. So I just need a decision so we can move on.
We'll continue.
Yeah.
All right, my request then would be for the Plan Commission, if you have specific comments that you would like for them to consider in their next revision, if we could have those by like Wednesday, that would be of this week, that would be helpful for them and for us, and to kind of assimilate all that and get it back to them so they can kind of have their roadmap of what they need to be working on in addition to this conversation. I mean, I think there were some things that people said they had some concerns, but there wasn't a lot of specificity to some of those comments. If we could get real specific, because I think that's what we're talking about, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Todd, and I would encourage commissioners to do so between now and Wednesday to be fair to the petitioner and help them work through this as them, not to be blindsided when they come back. That would not be right. So send everything to staff. They can work with the petitioner and see what they can put together. So thank you. Moving on to the next item of business. The following items are all public hearings. First one is 2007-ODP-11, 2007-SPP-11, Menards Warehouse Edition.
Thank you and good evening, Commission. Again, for the record, I'm John Dorsey with the Community Development Department. Before you tonight for public hearing is the Menards Expansion Primary Plat and Overall Development Plan. This project is located at 2150 East Greyhound Pass and totals approximately 16.23 acres. Petitioner is seeking to modify the existing property lines and to add approximately a 32,270 square foot warehouse on the east end of the Menards property. This petition is ready for a public hearing this evening. The hearing was properly noticed and advertised, and staff has not received any comments prior to tonight's meeting. Petitioner is present this evening and does not plan on making a presentation. However, the petitioner, the representative, and staff are available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. And please let the record show that Mr. Schmitz has left the meeting. This item does require a public hearing at this time, and I will begin the public hearing on 2007-ODP-11, 2007-SPP-11, Menards Warehouse Edition at 8:57 p.m.
We have not received any comments on this project at this time.
All right, let's give it a minute and see if anyone does. Ms. Howard, anything?
Nope, no comments.
Having none, we'll close the public hearing at 8:59 p.m. I do not have any questions or comments, so that takes us down to Dr. Kelleher. Any questions or comments?
A couple of questions. As I understand it, the proposed warehouse is going to occupy the western portion of that storage area. Is one building going to come down?
Hi, this is Tyler Edwards from Menards. Yes, that's correct. We are going to be purchasing the storage area behind the store and taking the largest building down and replacing it with our own warehouse building. And then we will continue to operate the remainder of the storage building through our Menards self-storage program. We have a few storage facilities across the country, so we'll run both the store and the storage.
Okay. And then my next question is, when we approved this self-storage unit behind these homes in the subdivision to the north, there was a lot of concern about buffering, and I believe there's a berm and there may even be a wall. I haven't been over there in a long time, so that those people had a nice transition and didn't look out into a big paved area with storage facilities. And you are going to build a building there now. How are you planning on buffering at least those two homes that will abut your building? And I'm talking about height-wise, because I'm sure that this warehouse is going to be taller than those self-storage units, landscaping-wise, and I want to make sure that there are no lights on the end of that building, or at least if they are, they're fully shielded and down so that we aren't shining into those two homes' backyards.
Sure. There are no lights on the outside of the building. There are lights inside the building, but that's of course covered by the roof and the wall, so they won't be visible from the exterior of the Menards yard. We are certainly open to adding some landscaping between our new building and the neighbors' lots. We haven't heard from any neighbors since the notices went out, but I think some transitional buffering would work for us.
Okay, because if you remove, could we go back to the plan as it exists today before the proposed warehouse? Do we have a picture of that? Yeah, so this new building, you're going to take out that one long building, but it looks like you're going to extend it much farther north in the new plans up to those two lots. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The new setback's about 12 feet, and I'd bet it's probably 20 feet today.
Okay. So are you going to be taking down then the berm and landscaping that are there, or are you keeping that?
We'll keep as many existing trees as possible. I'm not exactly sure how many of those will stay. I'll have to pull out the survey again. But rather than a berm's not going to do a whole lot for the 20-foot tall building in that space, so we'll add some big trees back there.
Okay, and this is a question for staff. Were there not, I believe there were commitments with this parcel on that northern, either commitments or where there was something. Did
Yes,
those
ma'am.
apply to this building?
This is John Dorsey again. Those commitments, while they do exist on the self-storage property, we will try to still address them as appropriately as possible for the expansion of the Menards property.
Okay, thank you. And again, I'm not against this expansion. I think it's a positive thing. I just want to make sure that those residences continue to be buffered enough that they can enjoy their backyard without looking at the side of a building. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Berkman, questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Mr. Horke, questions or comments?
I am good, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johns, questions or comments?
No questions, no comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Maui, questions or comments?
I have no questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCarty, any questions or comments?
No questions or comments. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Spolgeric, questions or comments?
Thank you. Jenny covered mine, so I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We will move on. Next item of business this evening is 2007-PUD-07 Bridgewater PUD Amendment Culvers.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members of the commission. Pam Howard with the Community Development Department. Before you this evening, we have an amendment to the Bridgewater Planned Unit Development District to accommodate a new Culver's restaurant. This 2-acre site is located on the west side of Gray Road, north of 146th Street, and was zoned the Bridgewater PUD in 2004. The proposed amendment would modify the permitted uses to allow a fast food restaurant and also incorporate a concept plan and character exhibits for the site. This item has been properly noticed and advertised for a public hearing tonight. And I do have Matthew Skelton with Churchill, and Antrim who would like to make a presentation, after which both he and I will be available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Mr. Skelton, you may proceed.
Good evening, members of the commission. Everybody hear me okay?
You're good.
All righty. Good evening, Matt Skelton. I'm a partner with Churchill, and Antrim with offices at 116 North Union Street here in Westfield. With me on the Zoom or on the Skype meeting this evening is Mark Jenkins and Tony Halsey of Kite Realty Group, owners of KRG Bridgewater LLC, who are the real estate owners. This item is a proposed amendment to the Bridgewater PUD that specifically pertains to the 2-acre parcel that Pam identified. The staff report covers the approval history pretty well, I think. I just want to highlight, this is kind of an interesting situation that this project was actually initiated 16 years ago. It's survived the Great Recession, as we call it, and now the Great Pandemic, I guess. So we're hoping that we finally have a solution for this piece of property. It is currently zoned for a commercial retail use. Culver's, the restaurant that desires to locate here, is classified by the staff, and we agree it constitutes a fast food land use under the applicable ordinances. Although Culver's may not be exactly the typical type of fast food image that one would conjure up when they hear fast food, it's probably, of the quick serve restaurant uses, it's probably about as good as it gets. They do share some elements with of fast food, but it's kind of an interesting land use. And a Culver's is actually, it includes a custard stand, all the thing that a custard stand would offer, and it includes a drive-through. And those things, if that's all Culver's was, are permitted use by right on this property. Culver's, of course, has a pretty robust food offerings as well. And as a result, there's a good question as to whether the Culver's hybrid kind of use constitutes a permitted use. So that's why it's before you this evening. The proposed PUD amendment, the intention behind it is really to eliminate any guesswork in the application of the PUD to plans that would come before the staff for approval. The intention is to have enough detail in the PUD that you're actually approving what is going to be constructed. It's the conceptual plans are less conceptual, or will be less conceptual than in a normal kind of situation. I will tell you just initially, Exhibit C, which is actually Exhibit 3 on your agenda. Exhibit C are the elevations, and this exhibit will change. We've had some initial feedback. We've been working, of course, with Bridgewater, as you might expect, and we're massaging the architectural plans to address some of the suggestions we've received from Bridgewater. And so by the time you would see this ordinance again before you for a vote, this will be a changed exhibit. We've also received some requests from the staff. There's some additional detail that we need to incorporate into the elevations that we've submitted that make it easier for them to perform their function when actual plans are submitted for approval. And then Exhibit B, which is Exhibit 4 of your agenda, Exhibit B of the ordinance, which is Exhibit 4 of your agenda, may change slightly. And that, Kevin, if you're operating this, that would be the concept plan. Yeah, the concept plan may be modified slightly. There will definitely be some additional details added to it, like dimensions and things. But there is I'm not sure it'll be ready in time for consideration by the Plan Commission, and if it's not, it may have to be addressed at a later date in another petition. But the owner has indicated an interest in incorporating a possible, call it a shelter or a cover area for folks who are engaged in curbside service to drive up traffic. And this is just something that's been learned in this pandemic era. This activity is happening in a lot of restaurants now, but there's no shelter. There's no cover from sun. There's no cover from rain. And in winter, of course, God forbid we're still dealing with this pandemic stuff. There's no shelter from snow and ice and things. So that's one thing that may be added to this that you do not see right now. The value of the improvements that will be invested here on this real estate is approximately $3 million. As Pam mentions in her staff report, we did have a neighborhood meeting. I think the staff report mentions that it was a virtual meeting. It was actually in person. And it was kind of nice to hang out in a room full of human beings for a change. But we had a neighborhood meeting on June 29th. We didn't have any remonstrance. There were a handful of items discussed. The architectural modifications that I mentioned that will be made, the likely addition of an outdoor amenity area that we plan to, we're working with Bridgewater on this as well, but the property to the north of us includes a pond area, and there's a desire to possibly construct an amenity area that would benefit from being able to overlook that pond. And this would not be exclusive, as contemplated, it would not be exclusive to Culver's. It would be available to anybody. And then, let's see, I think there was a general acknowledgement of pretty good traffic circulation, both pedestrian, bicycle, golf cart. There's actually a golf cart trail that goes right to the west of the property, and vehicles, of course. And then I already mentioned the possible addition of the canopy for curbside service. Our procedural game plan is and has been to collect input from the stakeholders. We've been diligent in doing this so far, and we would welcome, of course, the Plan Commission's comments and suggestions, and then we would like to take time to review those comments, make any revisions, and then resubmit for your formal consideration. And just as a note, we have already filed, I think in Pam's staff report, she mentions that one of the to-do items with this property is also a secondary plat filing. We have already filed that, and it should be moving through the process now. And the detailed development plan would come later after we're finished with the zoning process. I know we're scheduled for a public hearing this evening, but we're certainly available for any questions now or after the hearing. We very much thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Skelton. It does require a public hearing this evening. Begin the public hearing on 2007-PUD-07 Bridgewater PUD Amendment Culvers at 9:14 p.m.
At this time, we have received no comments.
All right, we'll give it a minute or two here. Ms. Howard, any emails?
No, no comments.
All right, I'll close the public hearing at 9:16 p.m. Looks like we're starting off with Ms. Spaldjeric this time. Questions or comments?
Just a few. I think that Culver's is probably going to do fantastic business in this location if it is allowed. I know that years past, a fast food with drive-through would not be even considered, but Culver's is enough of a difference, I think, that maybe it's more acceptable. I do have some issues with both the elevations, which are going to be changing, so I won't go too far into that, and as well as the signage. And we've tried really hard with the Bridgewater over the years to get that center to look a certain way. And these, both of the signage and elevations, at least right now, provide a pretty big deviation from that. And I don't know that it's fair that those standards were applied to others. And so I'd like to see that reflected in any changes. Thanks.
Thank you, and I would ask that any specifics that you, on the architecture or other things that you do submit to staff so they can pass it on to the petitioner. Mr. Schmitz has left the meeting. Mr. McCarty, questions, comments?
I have no questions or comments right now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Maui, questions or comments?
I only have one comment, and I'm still wrestling with what this means in terms of the wording of the ordinance change here. There seems to be a consensus both in the presentation and by comments already among commission members that Culver's is not your average fast food establishment, that it is kind of in a different class. And yet we don't approve something name specific. And so while in the direction this sounds like it's going, this may be approved for a Culver's, I'm kind of curious as to what we do to keep this from being, and I'm not going to put any names out there because we might all have a different opinion on what's a different class of fast food, but there are probably other establishments that would not be considered as acceptable here that might be difficult to distinguish from an ordinance language. And I'm curious, either Matt or staff, what anybody has to say in sort of recommending how we address that issue. That's my only comment. Thanks.
Anybody want to jump in on that?
I'm happy to respond if you'd like me to, Randy. This is Matt Skelton.
Thank you.
Yes, I would just the intention of the ordinance and the way that it has been constructed is to really lock down the approval to exactly what you're looking at. And again, that's going to change a little bit as Ms. Spaldjeric pointed out. But but what you will have before you, in any modification to it, would require a revisit to, that's the intention. And if we need to do more to try to figure out how to make you comfortable with that, then we will. But that's why this is structured that way, because we figured that would be an issue for somebody.
So if I may, Matt, does that mean it's the specificity of the character exhibits that really tie it to exactly what this is? It's not necessarily a language thing. It's the graphical presentation that locks it down.
That's the method by which we've tried to do that. Yes.
Okay. Understood. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Mr. Johns, questions or comments?
Yeah, I was able to be at the neighborhood meeting last week and got to participate. I think what I heard from Bridgewater was their main concern was with the architecture of the building, and it sounds like Matt's taking that to heart and taking it back and trying to rework the architecture. It seemed to be a consensus that they were hoping the building would look a little bit more like a village-style building and not so much as a typical Culver's fast food. And then the second concern that they raised, and I thought that was pretty interesting, was there is a lot immediately to the north of this lot, and that's the lot with there's a pond there. And Bridgewater, the folks from Bridgewater were asking that part of that lot be incorporated into this ordinance from the standpoint of adding some type of outdoor amenity or structure that would be placed on that property bordering the pond. So it sounds like Matt's taking that under consideration also, and I'm going to be really interested to see what they come back with and how that's worked into this ordinance. So those are my comments for tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Horke, questions or comments?
No questions and no comments.
Thank you. Ms. Berkman, questions or comments?
Yes, I just had one question. Are they planning to do any type of outdoor seating at this location?
Okay to respond, Mr. President?
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
This is Matt Skelton. Yes, in lieu of a private seating area, the idea is to try to create more of a public space, and that's what Mr. Johns was referring to. And so it wouldn't be a thing that is exclusively occupied, although it would probably be largely occupied by Culver's visitors. And we are working with Bridgewater on that right now. And what form that takes, there's probably a way to do it without it having, it's probably would be tied to the real estate, but maybe not actually incorporated into the planned development ordinance. That would, that'd be like an off-site improvement, but there's a way for us to agree with Bridgewater in a binding way on how to do that. But that's the game plan.
Okay, I think that's really an interesting idea. I'm just wondering about, from their business model, the way they deliver food is such that, you know, it's not a normal put it in a bag, you get a number. If you're sitting outside in Noblesville or Westfield, they bring the food to your outside table. And so it sounds like that wouldn't really be the case there. People would get a to-go item and go over there, and there wouldn't be a patio like there is in Noblesville or Westfield on how they usually do their business model. So am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, and actually you're asking a good question, and I'm not positive. There may be an outdoor seating area here, and that additional detail will be reflected properly.
Hey Matt, this is Matt. This is Mark Jenkins. I can jump in.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
If you don't mind. Yes, to answer your question, there is a small patio that is located immediately adjacent to the building, in addition to the offsite that Matt was referring to. So I just wanted to clear that up so there was no misconstrued idea there.
Thank you, Mark. And that'll be clearly reflected on the revised exhibit that you will receive.
Okay, great. Well, I think this pond idea is really an interesting idea, and but I am also glad to hear that there'll be a patio attached that they can service as their normal business model and how they usually do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Kelleher, questions or comments?
I think everybody has already addressed my questions. I had the same question that Mr. Maui did, remembering a remonstration against a chicken place here years and years ago. One other question. Did I read in the staff report somewhere that they were also asking for outside storage, or am I confusing that with something else?
That was not our petition.
Okay, thank you.
Right, the only thing I have is, I like the possible amenity pond thing. I mean, given the location of this, I could see people rolling through the drive-through on the golf cart and swinging right around and, going to that area, or just walking across. I think it would be nice if you can work something out with the Bridgewater, if that works out. That's all I had. Do any commissioners have any further questions, comments? Mr. Skelton, do you have anything else?
No, I appreciate the input, and if Ms. Bulgaric, to the extent that you have anything a little bit more specific in the way of the signage and elevations comments, we'd be happy to receive them, and I'll coordinate with Pam on that.
I'll work on it. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Move on to our last item of business this evening, which is 2007-PUD-08, Grassy Branch Marketplace PUD Amendment 1.
All right, thank you, Mr. President, members of the Planning Commission. For the record, Kevin Todd with the Community Development Department. I am pinch hitting for Dane Crabtree tonight, so please bear with me, but I do have his notes. So the item before you this evening is a proposed amendment to the Grassy Branch Marketplace PUD, which, as you see on the exhibit on the screen, encompasses the area near the northeast corner of State Highway 32 and Grassy Branch Road. It's immediately north of the Planet Fitness building and the multi-tenant building there on the hard corner that has Smoothie King and Chipotle, or I'm sorry, Moe's Southwest Grill. So this is lot 3 of that PUD, and currently under construction is a multi-tenant building on lot 3. So specifically, the amendment before us this evening would allow outdoor storage and display area of that future multi-tenant building that would house a hardware store, and the outdoor storage area then, per this amendment, would be allowed to be constructed of a 2-foot masonry knee wall with a 6-foot wrought iron or wrought iron-like fence material on top. So both of those fencing materials are allowed by the State Highway 32 overlay, which governs this site, but the conflict here is the outdoor storage and display standards for business districts in the UDO and this PUD require a solid wall consisting of masonry materials only. So that's the nature of the request. They're wanting to have some wrought iron fencing as part of their screening wall for their outdoor storage area. Additionally, the amendment would allow an entrance, the entrance to the outdoor seating area to be oriented towards the front yard. In this instance, it would be oriented towards the north, towards the private street. And I can't do two things at once. I should probably pull up the exhibit so you can see here. So this gate, this entrance would be on the north side, which is facing a private street, and our ordinance currently doesn't allow that. So this item is scheduled for a public hearing this evening. It's been properly noticed and advertised, and the department so far has not received any comments from the public on this project. If there are no concerns from the Plan Commission or from the public this evening regarding this petition, staff would recommend forwarding a recommendation to the City Council this evening. The petitioner's representative is here this evening on the call. He doesn't plan to make a presentation, but is available for questions, as am I, and I'll do the best I can if there are any for staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Todd. This item does require a public hearing this evening. Open the public hearing on 2007-PUD-08 Grassy Branch Marketplace PUD Amendment 1 at 9:30 p.m.
We did receive one comment during the meeting that I forwarded on to you along with the petitioner during Mr. Todd's comments. And if some members haven't received it, or if you prefer, I can also read it onto the record. It is a fairly short comment.
Since we're waiting for any additional comments, why don't you go ahead and read it, please?
Yes, this comment was sent by Michael Floor, who lives at 17725 Windwood Circle in Westfield. His comment states that he is concerned that if the outdoor storage is 24 hours and the impact it will have with the headlights exiting the storage area. He is requesting extra screening in the common area along Grassy Branch Road to keep headlights out of his home. He does not believe that traffic impact has been thought through, as he is already having issues with headlights from the traffic from Planet Fitness. And that's the end of the comment.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
Not at this time.
I will close the public hearing at 9:32 p.m. Looks like I'm up first this time. As far as the wrought iron, I don't have any take over it. If in my mind this is the use that I believe it is. I guess, okay, Mike, I do have one question. What are the hours of operation of this business, for proposed business at this location?
This is Justin Alashik. If everybody can hear me, I am presenting on behalf of Grassy Branch Partners LLC, and I can address that question if needed. So this will be a hardware store, an Ace Hardware, and this outdoor storage area. It's designated as outdoor storage, but truly it's a sales area. So the hours of operation would be your typical for a hardware store. It would not be 24 hours. It would be the typical Ace Hardware hours of, I don't know what their hours are off the top of my head, but it would not be the 24 hours as mentioned in the concerns.
That's what I was getting to. I'm familiar with what this looks like in Carmel, at least. I was there last Saturday. So I have a good understanding of how the brick and wrought look. It's not maybe exactly the same as that, but gives me an idea. That was my question stemming from the public comment. So I will yield to Dr. Kelleher. Any questions or comments?
No, I had the same question you did, and knowing the store in Carmel, I figured it was going to be for outdoor sales, pots, and things that you used in the summertime. The gentleman who wrote us, where does he live, Pam? Is he at the end of this long street, or do you know what?
I can take a look. I can pull it up in the GIS. If you have any additional comments you want to make while I'm looking that up, you're more than welcome.
Okay, I'm just thinking. He can't be next to it because there's going to be the school north of him, or north of this, and the only other place that there is some residential are the other side of Grassy Branch, and that wouldn't seem to have any effect on this. So That was my comment. I was just trying to figure out, it doesn't look like he's next to this anywhere.
Parquet's on here. I looked this up while we were talking because I was curious too. Woodwind Circle parallels Grassy Branch on the west side. It's that section of, I can't remember the neighborhood name now, but there's two sections of it. This is the easternmost section, and this is somebody whose rear of his house faces Grassy Branch. So apparently something's going on that brings lights into the back of his house where maybe there are bedrooms, so it's bothersome in that regard.
Okay, all right. So this really doesn't have much to do with that, because I think he's thinking of a self-storage unit where people might be coming and going 24 hours a day, and that's indeed not the case. So thank you, Bob.
Yeah,
Yes, and if
I
you're
agree. It
looking,
seems like, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, if you're looking at the location map, this is actually the existing entrance that is showing up on Grassy Branch Road that leads to the empty lot right along that lot line. The house is directly across from that entrance. So it's the fourth home up from Grandview Way on Woodwind, Windwood Circle.
Right. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you. Is that it? That was it, Dr. Kelleher?
That was it.
All right, Ms. Berkman, questions or comments?
No, thank you, Randy.
Okay. Mr. Horke, questions or comments?
No questions, no comments.
Mr. Johns, questions or comments?
No questions. Thanks, Randy.
Thank you. Mr. Malley, questions or comments?
I do not have any questions or comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. McCarty, questions or comments?
No questions or comments. Thank you, sir.
Ms. Bulgaric, questions or comments?
None at this time, thank you.
Okay. Anything else from the commissioners?
One additional comment from Pam Howard. We did receive a follow-up from the public commenter that I have forwarded to you as well.
I have not received that. Is it brief or lengthy? What do we have here?
It is brief. It says that yes, the light does shine directly into their bedroom window. They're concerned with the north elevation gate traffic, as it will flow more traffic exiting and entering toward their home.
Just okay. I appreciate that. I will say that with the hours of operation of a hardware store, I don't know if it's 9 to 5, but it's not a whole lot more than that. Has been my experience. So I'm not sure that this particular business use has a headlight effect necessarily. I mean, I suppose it could in winter time when the days are very short, but I don't see it as, I mean, if it was a storage area that, like I think Dr. Kelleher said, that was like a 24-hour storage area, the petitioner has answered that. So I don't know that while they have a concern with existing businesses, that's a valid issue, but that's already done. I don't feel like this really has an effect. So any other discussion from the commissioners? All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
Orke moves to adjourn. No. Oh, wait a minute.
We asked him
jumping ahead here. Yes.
For a motion on that.
It sounds like we're okay, and I'm ready to propose a motion that we go ahead and send a favorable recommendation.
I'll second that. This is Maui.
All right. I have a motion made by Mr. Horke, seconded by Mr. Maui to forward 2007-PUD-08 Grassy Branch Marketplace PUD Amendment 1 to the City Council with a positive recommendation. You call the roll, please.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz? I believe he left the meeting. Ms. Bulgaric?
Yes.
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Mr. Maui.
Yes.
Carries.
All right, thank you. Anything additional from staff this evening?
No, nothing additional. I think we can anticipate meetings in this format for the foreseeable future. So when and if that changes, we'll certainly let you know and give you as much warning as we can. But thank you for your flexibility on this. Appreciate it.
I do appreciate that because I miss my wooden gavel, and my orange Stanley 18-ounce dead blue hammer works quite well on my desk, but I'd like to get back to personal meetings. So now it's late enough. I'm rambling, so I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second. This is Kelleher.
Motion made by Randall Graham, seconded by Dr. Kelleher to adjourn tonight's meeting. Staff, please call the roll.
Ms. Boljeric,
Yes.
Ms. Bergman,
Yes.
Mr. Graham,
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
Mr. Johns,
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher,
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. McCarty.
Yes, I miss seeing you all.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Whoever that is coughing, you better get that checked out. Have a nice evening. Talk to you later.